This week in South Florida, down is up and up is down. This time there are protests for a tax hike in Miami-Dade, where the mayor and commission are poised to make unpopular cuts and dip into emergency reserves, but not to fund an emergency. We'll try to make sense of it all with both the mayor and the commission chairwoman here this morning. Plus, the end is in sight for Broward's billion-dollar-plus highway project that will change the direction, in a sense, of I-595. Stories people are talking about this week in South Florida. Good morning. I'm Glenna Milberg. Michael is off this week. Miami-Dade's plan to keep the tax rate flat, that's the one that came after the plan to raise it, that was almost reversed again at a hearing that went well past midnight this week until the mayor and commission decided to dip into emergency reserves, but not to fund an emergency. And it all ended with at least one squeaky wheel getting some oil, aka funding restored, but not all. And to explain that decision, we have with us this morning, good morning, both Miami-Dade's Mayor Carlos Jimenez and Miami-Dade's Commission Chair over a 13-member commission, Rebecca Sosa. Thank you so much for being here on a Sunday morning.
My pleasure.
And I want to start with that decision. It's the libraries that got the funding from emergency reserves. And the question is sort of why libraries of everyone who had an issue there to talk about, and why the reserves? Is that a prudent decision, Mr. Mayor?
Well, the good news is that we don't have to dip into the emergency reserves. What the commission decided was to take the money necessary in order to keep the libraries open the same number of hours with the same number of employees. Now, we were working on a plan to keep the libraries the same number of hours, but not with the same number of employees. The problem with the library system, part of the problem with the library system, is that it's a very expensive system to run. With librarians, the average salary for a librarian being something like $70,000 plus another $20,000 for benefits. So the average salary and benefits is about $90,000. So it's a very expensive system to run, and so the majority of expenses are people. We were like I told the commission, we were working on a plan to keep all the libraries open the same number of hours, but we couldn't possibly keep the same number of people. What the commission did was they said, last time I came here, I said we have a plan for 2 years. Well, part of that plan is that there's a thing called carryover, which is we had some carryover from previous years. We were going to use about half of it this year, and we're going to use about half of it next year in order to maintain the services the same way. The commission, really what they did is they use that carryover all this year, and then we have a year to work out the issues with the library. And then what I told the commission was, look, and very clearly so, I said, okay, if you want to use it all this year, we're going to keep all the employees there, but next year we are going to have probably a $15 to $20 million issue or cliff that we're going to hit and you only have one of two things. We have to sit down and determine what the future of that library is going to be, what the funding is going to be, and then if we don't do that next year, then you may have to raise taxes in order to keep the services at the same level. That's what the commission decided they wanted to do.
And that brings up really what is the issue here. You're keeping your promises to people who value libraries that are so important. Mm-hmm. There are people like the people from the Pets Trust who feel like promises have been broken. You have the fire rescue that is losing money. Those seem to be the three big pots of money that people were really asking about. You've got 10 unions who have made concessions, who want their contribution to health care back. I mean, Ms. Chair, what do you do when you have all of these people in the commission and then you've chosen what might have been the loudest group to accommodate?
Because you listen to the community, and the outcry of the community is why libraries, because an incredible percentage of the community have spoken clearly to our offices. They are very interested in libraries, they're very interested in rescue services, in police, and then they talk about the dogs. We were able to set aside $4 million, 40% of the allocation for the no-kill initiative in our animal department, which means if you're going to do a construction in a house and the cost is going to be $100,000, you don't have to have the $100,000 the first day. So we're beginning the process. All the rescue units were safe, and all the libraries were safe. I'm glad that you said it, Mayor. It's a carryover. It's not that we decided to take money from a pot that we were not allowed to.
Well, some of it is the county reserves. If I can just stop you for a moment, I want to play a little piece of a mayor's interview that he did with Michael Putney here on this program last month, and the context was I think, Mr. Mayor, you had said that in the context of union concessions, you couldn't possibly give any more to the unions because you would have to dip into reserves, and
Correct.
you were dead set against that. Let's take a listen.
Put their hands on. We're going to send a letter to the state asking them what our reserves need to be. But I'll tell you what, one thing, as a mayor and as an administrator, I'm not happy with the reserve levels that we have in Miami-Dade County.
So are we talking apples to apples, and what's changed?
No, you haven't. You remember, reserves are one thing, carryover is something else. Carryover is money that was meant for operations, that wasn't spent years prior, that are part of that budget. And so we had carryover, and we were going to use there was $10 million in carryover. We were going to use 5 of it this year, and we're going to use 5 of it next year.
But there's extra money coming from
There is
the
$2.8 million in reserves. We're not touching that, all right, for the libraries. So what they did is, instead of having this system for 2 years, they decided, no, we want to keep all of it, and that's only a system for 2 years with cuts in employees. They decided, no, we want to have it for 1 year and don't cut any employees.
But isn't this piecemeal leadership? I mean, isn't this, we're looking at this year, we're doing what we can to plug holes, and then what about next year? And you're going to face that in a couple of months.
We are not different to what is happening in every house in Miami-Dade County. With this economy and the problems that we have, we as a government have to do the same thing they do at home, to go in piecemeals. And another program that is very important for the community that I forgot to mention was the Head Start program. And I am very glad to say that there's an impact because of Washington's sequester that is going to take away some funding, but we took care of that part in our budget, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So for those who are calling and asking about Head Start will be there for the children and will serve the children.
That's very good news. You know, what we've heard in the newsroom is from a lot of the people who are very vocal, who feel like promises have been broken, aka Pets Trust. The straw ballot that was in November, there was a clear majority of the county who said they wanted a no-kill shelter. That is not on the table this year. That was part of the reason some of that group staged a recall effort that is not at the moment going to happen, chose Linda Bell, who was one of the votes to keep the tax flat. You have people who have promises that they think they've been made that are not being fulfilled. That's what we hear in the news.
I understand, but you know, first of all, people are not going to like this, all right? I had 6 town hall meetings, all right? The vast majority of the people that were at the 6 town hall meetings were the same people, all right? There are 2.5 million people in Miami-Dade County. And I believe that the county commission agrees that the vast majority of the people, or the majority of the people in Miami-Dade County, don't want their taxes raised.
And how do you know that?
Because it's innate. You go out and talk to people, and the handshakes that I get when I go out in the community say, don't raise my taxes, okay? It's not the same people.
Which is actually how you became mayor.
Exactly.
There's a recall
right.
effort.
There's a recall because there was a previous mayor that raised taxes.
Yeah, your first budget raised taxes a little bit.
Yes, but you know what? The outcry from the community that I heard, that wasn't the right thing to do. And I'll admit it, that wasn't the right thing to do. The right thing to do was to keep the rates flat. Now, what we did do for the Pets Trust is that we had an unprecedented rise in the budget for the Animal Services Department of 40%. That's unprecedented. We've also fully funded during my administration a new shelter. All right, that's unprecedented too. And so we're going to have a new shelter. We even without this raise in 40%, we have taken the save rates for cats from something like 20% to 60%, for dogs from 60% to 80%, without raising a dime of taxes. And so now we're going to put an additional $4 million into another 40%. So it's going to make a huge dent in what the people, the intent of the people was to get to a no-kill. I think we're going to get to a no-kill without having that $20 million tax hike that the Pets Trust people want.
I think that's the first time I've heard that. Break a little news.
And we have improved in an incredible way in our animal department with the adoptions, and we will continue to do so. And there's funding to do the no-kill initiative. But there's another issue that is going to be a challenge, and for me it's very important, which is the anti-venom from the fire department.
My understanding is that department has gone away for now.
No.
Is unfunded.
And that's what I want, the mayor, because this is a priority for me. We not only serve the residents of Miami-Dade County, we even serve the military with that anti-venom unit. We are the only ones that provide that service.
Well, you know, the priorities in government, I think everybody would agree, public safety and health. And, and so when all of these other things come into play, and then you have your workforce who, from my perspective, is up in arms, who have never had to contribute to their own health insurance. The police, the fire, well, the fire is a different story, but the police union of sanitation, who almost got their contributions back, except for your veto. Is that you think that's going to be an override?
I
for the
believe
commission?
that we either give it to everyone or we don't give it to anyone. And I think that the mayor will have to work very hard with the unions when the contracts come now in January for renegotiation, because our employees have sacrificed for a few years to help balance the budget.
I want to read you an email I got this morning.
That's where she and I are going to have a disagreement. In terms
We
of
will.
You want to
With a lot of respect.
telegraph
in
that
order
for
to-
us?
Yeah,
this
absolutely,
morning?
because what is considered sacrifice, when we can compare our employees to other employees, private sector, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we're going to need to compare that. And the average salary of the average wage earner here in Miami-Dade County makes about $32,000 a year. The average wage earner in Miami-Dade County makes quite a bit more. And when you talk about a contribution of health care of 5%, even in government, there are a lot of other cities, counties, et cetera, where their employees are contributing much more than the 5%. And so, at the end of the day, I'm going to work with the locals, and I'm going to work with the unions. But at the end of the day, we will have a certain amount of money, and we have to provide services within that amount. I am still dead set against dipping into any kind of reserves to pay for increased benefits, and to me, giving back the 5% is increasing benefits. It's going to cost us $22 million.
That won't be responsible to
Okay.
dip into reserve, because we have a mandate that we have to honor. What we need to do is to sit down and work after we adopt this budget this year, and the priority is public safety, which is number one priority for this county. Libraries are an incredible point, and then we have to scale down where we go.
Why are you smiling?
Well, because we actually do agree most of the time, okay? And so this time we're, hey, this 5%, and there were some promises, and I never made a promise, all right? I never made a promise to restore that 5%. That's why it's a reopener.
I want to read you an email we got from a viewer this morning. Skip Vancell is his name. He was making the point that these protests, people want their taxes raised, or wanted their taxes raised for a specific reason. And what he says is not to finance, this is his quote, gold-plated double pensions and executives that pull down almost as much as President Obama. And that was the reasoning that he was giving for, we didn't mind a little tax hike, but for a specific reason.
But my
Is that what you're hearing?
proposal to allow the community this year for the first time, that at the time they receive their bill and they have to pay their taxes, they will have the option to select the department they want to contribute, voluntary contribution. If you want to donate to the No Kill initiative, you can donate and you can send a check. Then we will have separate accounts to make sure, with an independent audit, to make sure that the funding goes straight to where the people donate. So we're going to please those who cannot afford to pay more taxes because of the increase in insurance. The increase in the water bill this year is too much for 1 year. And then those who, thank God, can pay a little bit more, that they can select the department that they want to donate to.
It pains me to say this. We have to end here for time, but that's a very interesting idea, and I really would love to hash this out a little more. Maybe we'll do that this week.
Okay.
All right, thank you
Great.
both so much for coming in this Sunday morning. Up next, we are headed to the highway. Big news for those who endure that maddening mess on Broward's congested east-west corridor. Reversible lanes coming to I-595. Stay with us. I-595, if that's part of your commute, you have been maneuvering around a construction mess on that critical east-west route across central Broward. It's more than $1 billion project to install reversible express toll lanes to free up that daily congestion. And the end is in sight, as Todd Tongan found out on the highway this week.
They are sawing, compacting, and laying concrete along I-595's new express toll lanes 7 days a week, 3 shifts a day.
Most months we have over 150 different crew or construction companies out here working, about 2,500 different workers out here every day.
In fact, the $1.2 billion construction project is already 90% complete and should be open in late March 2014. You have probably noticed they've already installed the reversible gates that will be used to keep drivers headed in the right direction.
From a safety standpoint, you would have to go through a number of warning gates similar to a railroad crossing gate. They will swing out of the way if a car hits them, but the last gate before you would come into the system in the wrong direction is a barrier gate.
Keep in mind, it is not just the express toll lanes that will be reversible. The two new ramps that they built to go on to the Turnpike north and southbound are also reversible, and that could cause some confusion for drivers on the Turnpike. So they're planning an information campaign to educate commuters next January. They have also hit a milestone regarding bridges. They built 23 new bridges and widened or modified 40 more.
So we're excited. This weekend we have one last bridge to set beams on, and we're going to do that over the weekend through an extended closure.
They've also installed miles of fiber optic cable and put up electronic signage, even landscaping. Engineers insist the construction pain will be rewarded with driving pleasure, as the new lanes will get long-range commuters into the city or home quicker, at the same time easing congestion for those who live and drive along the I-595 corridor.
Say within the first year, we would expect about 25,000 vehicles a day to use the express lanes.
Those reversible express lanes are scheduled to open next March. 6 more months. Up next, your turn to weigh in what we heard from you this week. And now for the mail, we got a lot about the 12-year prison sentencing for the drunk driver who hit and killed and left a cyclist dead on the Rickenbacker. Via Twitter, Raul Ortego commented he should have gotten at least 25 years. And via Facebook, Neil Eisenberg wrote, as a cyclist and the father of a cyclist, I have no pity for the DUI killer. Murder is murder. We got strong feedback about Tamarack. City leaders granting embattled Commissioner Patricia Atkins-Grad the $8,000 she wanted in exchange for her resignation. On Local10.com, a viewer called underwhelmed. He commented, holding the citizens of Tamarack hostage for $8,000 speaks volumes about this person's integrity. And a pedestrian's death in a crosswalk at Miami International this week brought this comment from Gordon Holly Jr., who writes, I thought most airports' speed limits were 15 miles an hour. I bet the driver was texting. In fact, that is something detectives are looking into, we find out. And still to come, a perspective this morning about balancing the county budget for 1 year, for future years, or not. Stay with us. Even if you did stay up past midnight for all 8.5 hours worth of Miami-Dade's budget hearing, it may be tough to recall any one thing any one commissioner said, except for what Barbara Jordan said, as she and 8 others voted to use reserves, the county's money, to fund a year of the library budget. Let's worry about next year, and deal with this year. That's a quote and a vote from someone responsible for charting the course of a county. And it is short-sighted and dangerous way to run government. No matter where you live, your tax dollars pay for planning and studies and long-range calculations to make sure your essential services and the people who provide them will be funded. And that cannot be compromised by any elected official looking to appease constituents or garner future votes. What family would choose to live paycheck to paycheck? And what viable business could survive without a long-range plan for growth? Commissioner Jordan is a smart woman. She's worked in county government for decades. Maybe it was an offhand comment in a stressful, exhausted moment. South Florida is already paying plenty of long-term costs for the decisions of commissioners who chose short-sighted gains. Our government should be worrying about this year and next year and beyond. And that is our program from this morning. Have a beautiful Sunday. And as always, stay informed. Get involved. I'm Glenna Milberg.